Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone to the Clip Studio Paint demo. What I'm going to be showing you today is pretty much exactly the tools that I use to make my comics. I'm not going to be going into every little nook and cranny of the software. I'm going to be showing you all the practical things that I use to make my comics more quickly and efficiently. And if you're coming from a traditional drawing background, I came to doing digital through doing traditional comics, and so my workflow is very similar to how you would be doing things on paper, just using layers. So if you're new to digital cartooning, then hopefully that will be a helpful metric that you can use to help think about making the transition to digital if you're looking to do that. I just have some. This is just some of my artwork, so you have an idea of who I am and what I do. Some of these are paintings. Some of these are actual physical paintings, but I did the initial drawings in Clip Studio. I planned them in Clip Studio, and then did actual paintings from them. This was the work that I used Manga Studio for coloring. So yeah, so this is just some of my work. So you have an idea of what who's teaching you. So yeah, let's just dive right into the program. So if you're already familiar with with Clip Studio, you might notice that the layout is slightly different. I've arranged this for my own purposes, but I'm using all the basic same palettes. They're just at slightly different locations than if you were to first fire this on. But I will be talking about the exact things that. Okay, look, I need to resize this. All right. And if you get confused at any point, or something comes to mind, please put your hand up and ask questions. I am more than happy to answer them, especially if they're dumb questions. I love answering dumb questions. Because sometimes dumb questions are actually smart questions in disguise. All right, so without any more preamble, let's just dive in. So what I've got here is your open workspace. So as soon as you were to fire up a new page, this is what you're going to get. Now this, I give Gerald, I have some handouts that you guys can take home that has some cheat sheet stuff that you can use when you take home. So one of the things I have on there is the specifications for a standard comic page, for instance. So this is 11 by 17 with 1/4-inch borders for bleed and a 1-inch inset for the safe area. I have this set up as a template for me. Clip Studio does not come with that as a standard template, but I have all the settings on the cheat sheet, so you'll be able to take that home. So just like when you fire up, you're going to get over here in the layers area here. It's going to have one called paper, which unlike your in Photoshop, that is not an editable layer. That's just a flat color layer that is just, it's called paper. You can't draw it. So I want to square that away. And then you have a starting point drawing layer. So if I were to start out with my comics, I would be doing thumbnails first. Rarely, unless I'm here, if I'm doing an illustration, doing comics, whatever, I'm going to start with my thumbnails. So I would use this first layer for thumbnails. Another thing I want to point out, a big difference between Clip Studio and Photoshop is layers have a lot more control. You have a lot more control over your layers than you do in Photoshop. And the big one is you can change the color mode by layer. So you don't have to change, if you're working in black and white and you want to switch to color, you don't have to convert the document to color. You can just convert the layer you're working on to color. And it's in this layer property palette up here. And right now it's defaults to gray because I'm going to be doing a black and white. I mostly work in black and white comics. but I do color things too, and we will cover some color by the end. Say you do your thumbnails, like let's do a quick panel layout here. And I'm going to just use a basic pencil tool. That's right here. I use the rough pencil mode. That's a standard brush. It's not a, this is not a, I don't use any sets from, or purchased from anybody. I just use the basic tools. So let's do a quick basic panel layout here. We'll have some stuff that's at an angle, we'll have some things that are straight up and down. So once you have like a rough layout of your, where you want things, and maybe we'll even put some suggestions of people and comics, really rough thumbnails, doesn't really matter. So once you have that, say you want to like build your panel borders. Well, there is some fancy panel border tools in here. I don't use any of that. All I do is I use rulers. And that is one of the things that I feel that Clip Studio does really, really well, is rulers. So I'm going to do what, if you are used to drawing traditionally, you might be familiar with drawing in blue pencil first for like thumbnails. Well, there's a toggle that will turn your layers automatically to a blue layer. And it's just this little color toggle here at the top of the layers palette. And I use that all the time, because anytime I create a new layer, I'm going to draw right over the top of it. So let's turn this into some panels. So this is a little trick that I use using the perspective ruler. So the ruler tool has got a lot of different modes here. You can see. But the one I'm going to be using is the perspective ruler. And instead of trying to use it to simulate perspective, what I'm going to do is to use it to simulate a T-square. So if you're familiar with traditional drafting and you just want to draw basic perpendicular lines, so I'm going to hold the shift key. I'm holding it on my iPad, but you hold it on your keyboard. Or if you're using the iPad app, there is an actual little shift key button. In this case, I'm using Astropad, and it has one. And so I'm going to hold that, and what it does is it locks it to a 45-degree increments. And so now I've drawn two parallel lines with this perspective ruler. And now what I can do is rule my panels as if I was using a T-square and like a triangle at home. But of course I've got these angled lines. What am I going to do with those? Well, I'm going to go over into, I'm so used to using the keyboard, but I need to actually show you where things are. So I'm going to use the basic object selection tool here, and I'm going to click on the ruler grid, and I can move this thing around. I can also rotate it, and if I hold shift, both of these lines are going to rotate. And why that's important is that it's going to keep them parallel. So I can now draw parallel lines anywhere on this grid or on the page. So I'll use that to draw these angles, these angled panels. I'll do it again. So yeah, I'm basically just going to walk you through the process of drawing a page here. Let's move this one. Looks like that's pretty close. There we go. I'm not going to actually draw a whole page, though. That would take too long. But you get the idea. And again, if you want any clarification on this, please let me know if I'm not being clear. Oh, you may notice that it's snapping. When you use the perspective ruler by default, it will also notice where the horizon is, and in this case the horizon is vertical because of the way I drew my lines, and so it's locking to the horizon. It's not vertical, it's horizontal, and it's locking to the horizon. So I'm getting these parallel lines if I draw them slightly at the wrong angle. which is useful when you want it and not useful. Oh, get it. I was holding shift. Duh. All right. So there's some panel lines drawn very quickly, and this would be the same sort of layout you would do with traditional software. So in my process, then I would go and proceed and draw pencils over these thumbnails. And again, I'm just using the basic pencil tool. I like the rough pencil ones, but there's other selections. If you really have specific tools in mind, I now know that Clip Studio can now import Photoshop brushes in. So if you have specific libraries of your favorite brushes in Photoshop, you can now bring them into Clip Studio. I know Kyle's is very popular, so now you can use those. There's entire brush sets you can just download. It's kind of overwhelming for me, so I just stick to the basics. But let's skip ahead to we're in the penciling mode here. So since we're still covering rulers, I just showed you how to use the perspective ruler for drawing borders, but let's show you how that actually works to, like, say, draw a background. So let's zoom in here on this upper panel here, and say I wanted to draw a building here in this upper spot. Oops, using the wrong tool. So use the pencil. So the way I work is I do a really rough drawing of what I want to draw first. So I have a basic idea of where my perspective lines are going to be. So in case, like maybe there's some guy here and maybe he's yelling, "Rah!" Maybe he's running. He's yelling and running. But I want to draw this building in the background. And maybe I even want to put some speed lines in there too, because I'm totally a minor dude, and that would be cool to me. So let's check here. 30 is good enough. So what I would do first is figure out, all right, I know I've got these main angles here. So I'm going to use the perspective ruler to mimic those angles, and that's going to create it's going to find the horizon for you, it's going to find the vanishing points, and then it will automatically lock your pencil to whichever of those axes it picks up that you're trying to draw. And it's pretty accurate. So I'll walk you through that. So we're going to go back to this perspective ruler thing. You may have noticed this may have been the main reason that I bought this program in the very first place. All right, so I'm going to use this main line for the building here. And knowing my basics of perspective, the horizon is always going to be in line with where the camera is, or where your eye is. And so anything that is at eye level, the horizon is going to cross through that. So in this case, I'm going to just eyeball it here, but I'm going to guess that the horizon for this guy is going to be sort of like here in the corner. It might not be 100% right, but it'll be close enough. So now I've got these two lines, and those two lines are going to determine where the horizon is and the vanishing point is automatically. So we can take a look at that, and it's over here. If you notice, it's off the page. So here it is. There's the vanishing point, and there's all these controls. You can move it around. You can even rotate the horizon if you want. You can even turn them on and off. So you can turn an axis on and off if you want to like mute it while you're working to do something else. So now I've got the first one. So this would allow me to draw this section of the building, and hey, look, it automatically locks to the vertical. It automatically locks to the horizontal, although I don't need that. So I could say draw a couple of stories here. We could We could draw the building next door if we wanted. And you know, this isn't Clip Studio specific, but there's a couple of tricks if you're drawing a building and you want to say have evenly spaced windows. There's a very easy trick for that. So the first step is to kind of create the equivalent of a box, of a rectangle somewhere. And then you draw a little X through it. Whoops. It's a little harder on the other side, but I have to like do an initial point. So I'm dropping at the upper right hand corner. I'm going to go to the lower left hand corner of that box. And I'm going to hold, oh shoot, it didn't work. This is easier on the Cintiq than the iPad because you can see where your cursor is ahead of time. So I'll just do it using a, so if you hold shift, it'll create a, it'll show you where a straight line is from drawn for that point you click down. So you can pass it through that bottom left-hand corner. Click again. And then you do it again, and you can do from the other corner here. And now you've found the center of that point. You can use that to like have things, or in this case, that other one that I drew here, you can use that to draw the next set of windows. And then you draw another line through that other one, and then you draw the next set of windows, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And they look like they're evenly spaced as you go, and they get closer and closer together. And it's just sort of by automatic. So it's a nice little trick for drawing things like buildings. You don't need Clip Studio for that, but that's a perspective too. I could do a whole top on it. That'll be another mice. So we're going to do the same thing on this on the other axis now. So we've already got a line. So I'm back in the perspective tool, and I'm going to match it up. Now I'm doing a little below the rough because I already drew some of the pencil lines, but how am I going to match that up? How am I going to make that work? Well, again, we're going to hold shift and find the horizon. And I believe the horizon is this second line here, because it's parallel. And draw my second line there. And now the second set of the second axis is going to line up with that axis. You can also do, just put it arbitrarily, but you might end up changing the tilt of the horizon that way. This way you can automatically lock it. So if you want to have all those things looking like they're in the same space, you can use any number of these rulers, but as long as you lock to the horizon, you can have something that looks like it's rotated or whatnot, and as long as you lock those on the same horizon, it'll look right. So yeah, here we go. There's another building. So I've got a little thing on the cheat sheet that covers this, but this is a demo of how that works. And I would go ahead and draw this character the way I would normally draw a character. So let's see. Here's an example of a page, and I'll just pull pencils. This one doesn't have has different kind of crazy backgrounds, but it doesn't have the. So yeah, I would draw the characters in over the top of my thumbs. So my thumbs are here. A little hard to see. Sorry, maybe it's not exactly the best page for that. That's okay. So here's an example of a page of thumbs. So then I'd go in and just draw directly by turning the thumbnail layer here. Layer it back, go and draw over the top of it, clean it up, clean up the anatomy, make it a little tighter. And then once I have those finished pencil lines, so go back to this one as the example, then I would be ready to ink. So, these are reasonably tight pencils. So let's talk about inking. So the inking tools in Clip Studio are the second thing that sold me on using this program. I tried to ink in Photoshop, it never worked well for me because I like having nice little precise points. So if I want to start from 1 pixel and go to an end on 1 pixel, for instance, it couldn't do that. It always just never quite got down to 1 pixel. So, but the brush tools in here are just freaking gorgeous. So I'm going to skip I'll skip the penciling phase here. We'll go direct to, I'll just do a quick inking over the top of one of my thumbnails here. But, so in the pen tool, what I am using is a modification of the basic G pen, which is the bog standard setting for the ink tool. It gives a good line to what I'm looking. Again, I'm kind of a manga influenced guy, but you get nice, crisp, clean lines. If you're kind of not very confident in your line making, you can change the what's called stabilization here, and that will actually correct your lines. It slows it down a bit, but this is great if you want to say like draw balloons. It'll clean up your lines. If you were in the hand lettering demo that Kurt did a couple of an hour and some change before, someone asked like, how do you draw such very precise word balloons? Well, my trick is I use Clip Studio. And I actually have, it's not on my laptop, but on my main computer, I actually have a balloon pen that all my settings are just ready to go there. I've just saved it out as its own setting and I use that. But my go-to is this new one, which is a modification of the G pen, except it has a little bit of roughness to it. Because I'm trying to mimic the look of the work that I do on paper, so I want to have a little bit of tooth in there, so it roughens it up a little bit. But you know, that's just a matter of taste, and the way that, just for example, how you would do that. Let's see. Let me actually select the G pen. How would I turn that into a textured pen? There is literally. Oh wait, no, it's not the texture. It is brush tip. Circle. Where are you? Effect. Texture. Where is it? Oh, tip shape. There it is. We've done this one up. I set it up and then I was done. So yeah, it's under brush shape, and there's just there was like a rough. I wonder where it is. This version. Well, anyway, pen, pencil. All right, I'll have to show you that later because I've forgotten how that works, but it can be done. I just forgot how you do it. Oh well. So another thing, if you are looking very closely or paying close attention when I created the new ink layer, you'll notice this is not actually, unlike Photoshop, which is a totally raster-based, pixel-based program. Clip Studio actually has vector support for vectors. So I do all my inking on vector layers. The advantage of that is, one, you can actually edit them if you want. I don't do a lot of direct editing, but you can literally move the line around and tweak things. But more importantly, you can resize them and you will not lose any information. So the pixels will be perfect if you scale them up. So if you want to move anything around or resize an image after you're done, or say take a comic panel and blow it up and turn it into a poster or something, if you use vector layers, you can do that and you will not lose any quality at all. It's really powerful. Another thing that the vector layers are really good for is coloring. If you're used to doing any comic book coloring that's going to be sent out to a printer, you want to be careful of something called trapping, which is making sure the colors go inside the line. So like the black is covering the color and overlapping it to some extent. And there's a little setting, say if I were coloring this, I have to create a new layer, but so if I was going to color this, I put a layer, and I need to, let's fill that in. And I wanted to like say color this red. There's a little check box here. If you look closely, it says fill up to vector path. And what that does, if we zoom in here, and if I fade this out, you'll notice, oh, it didn't quite do it. Maybe I need to uncheck favorites here. Let's try that again. This should work. Someone taught me this just a couple years ago. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know it did that. Did it work now? Oh, I have to make sure it's checked. Yes, now it works. See? So it's going exactly to the middle of the line, just by default. So if you're doing any coloring that involves trapping and you're going to be prepping files for, now, I have friends who use CMYK coloring in Photoshop and it does not do that, unfortunately. But
that's with the standard fill tool where there's that checkbox?
yeah, it's in the standard fill tool.
Great.
Yep. But only if you're working on a vector layer. It only works if you're working on a vector layer. Another question?
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had to be on the same vector layer or if it could be on a different vector layer referencing.
Oh, we can reference other layers. In fact, the fill tool has a really powerful filter for which ones you can have it look at all the layers everywhere. You can have it look at only layers in a folder. So I use that one a lot. So if I want to like just have it pay attention to like my inks, I put all my inks in one folder.
How do you toggle a vector layer? Like how do you make sure you're working on it?
Okay, it's it actually has its own creation thing here. So this is create a standard layer. This is create a vector layer. There is also a way to convert between them. So you can convert layer. But if you're converting it from a raster-based layer to a vector layer, it won't be as clean, but you can still do it. So occasionally I'll start inking and then forget that I'm on a regular raster layer, and I'm like, oh, oops, I wanted vector, and then I'll convert it. So it's there. You can swap them. Anyway, so that is a quick overview of that. Another thing that this is really good with, that this is something, again, that sold me that Photoshop cannot do, and I'll switch back over to this. So say you're working on a page and you're halfway through inking something, you decide you want to change something. Say like you want to resize a character or something. Well, in Photoshop, you'd have to like break all those layers or like, you know, out into separate things. But in this, you can just freaking select the character and whatever layers you want to thing. So like here's just 2 layer folders, and hit transform under edit. I use the key command, but it's edit, transform. And then you can resize all the layers. Everything within that selection. It's a little slow, but like that is incredibly powerful. So then you can completely, you know, down to individual, you know, select which layers you want, and it will transform all those. That's really, really time saving. So if you're doing thumbnails and you're doing pencils and you want to like make sure that thumbnails come along with it, you just do that. Just make sure you select the layers that you want to transform. Other things that Clip Studio is really good about it. So, yeah, 503, yeah, we're doing fine on time. But say coloring wise, I already have like a tone version of this page, but let's just do like as if we're going to color this. So a couple of tricks. We'll go back to this. Fill up to vector path bit. Oh, I also make sure that this is in color. I'm using red, even though this is like totally not the right color for your hair, but whatever, it doesn't matter. A couple things. So normally you would just have to like hit things and fill them in. You can also like click and drag and fill in multiple areas as long as they're the same color. In this case it's all white, so of course it's going to work. But another thing it does automatically is it will close gaps. So let me find something that's got like a real gap in it. Usually hair has gaps. Was I too clean on that one? Let me just hit something at random and see what happens. I'll uncheck close gap. So normally what happens in Photoshop, you hit and you try to fill an area. Oh, well, there's some bits that I didn't quite close. So I've got a couple of pixels open somewhere. Oh, it looks like it's on that toe. I'd have to like go fill that in and then try again. Well, in this, it's got this close gap function, and you can sort of. This is again in the. This is in the fill tool properties. Close gap. And so I'll sort of hit it somewhere in between, and voila, it closes that gap for you. So you don't have to fill it in. Now, it can get a little hinky if you're like doing a lot of detailed areas, then you might have to go back and fill in, because it'll skip stuff if you've got pixels that are too close together. But for them, like for instance, like here, you can see on the foot. So this makes coloring really fast. And when you combine that with the whole fill up to vector line thing, you're in pretty good business. Now, I do have a friend who does work for like Scholastic, and his coloring style is entirely using CMYK. And so he develops all his palettes in CMYK first. And unfortunately, that's the one thing I wish Clip had was a CMYK native mode. It does not. It can import and export CMYK, but it cannot work natively in CMYK. So if your working method is very CMYK based, this might not be the right tool for you. I know how to tweak my files once I've finished. I'll do all my coloring work here, bring it into Photoshop, and then tweak it, make it work for CMYK. Also, I generate all my palettes initially in Photoshop in CMYK, and then copy it over, open it up, converts it to RGB, but it limits the gamut on it, so it doesn't have any weird colors, and then it gets converted back. It's not a one-to-one perfect comparison, but it's close enough to my eye, so it's good enough. So what else could I cover here? We've got about 20 minutes, so I know I've barely scratched the surface. I've just covered the very raw basics here. There's a lot of really powerful tools in here. Things like, like for reference, so like bringing photos, and there's like a mode where you can just resize it to any size, and it just uses the same data. But it's just like image reference layer. I use that a lot.
Can you show that? The image reference?
Yeah, so I've got this refs layer here. Let's see. Oh, maybe this is not the right. All right, yeah. So I had like this thing. Oh, it looks like I didn't actually use that function, but I can show you how it works. So for this, I'm not shy about using reference So like to create those leaves in the background, I actually used a photo I'd taken to help break that out. So one thing, in this case I just sort of cut and paste, but there are times when what you want to do is, like you want to save some file space, you can convert this to a image material layer, and oh, did it move? Oh yeah, I don't know why it moved, but anyway, so now it's saved all that information, and now I can resize it, and it will basically stay the same. It's almost like a vector layer with an image mapped onto it, essentially. It's similar to a smart layer in Photoshop, but it's not a nested thing. It's just for a single material. So yeah. Oh right. Oh, I know why. This is a freaking huge image. Yeah. Well, I think I didn't do this part. I just resized it. Anyway, it doesn't do anything special. It just saves. It means it's non-destructive. It doesn't change that. You can resize it infinite times. It doesn't change the pixel data inside. Question?
I have a question about how you go to set up your document. I know that
Sure.
it has an illustration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a very good question. Yeah. There's a lot of different modes here. So the one I'm using is the second one for comic.
Okay.
And you've got all your basic things here. It's defaulting to. What is it?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. I used this one. Sorry, because this one you can change between metric or imperial, and
Yeah.
I'm apparently a staunch imperialist. I need inches. I just don't think in centimeters. But if you think in centimeters, you can use that. Oh, and here are all my settings for a page here.
Okay.
So.
Standard or just
Well, that's standard American classic, like Marvel comics. That's always the size I've worked. I mean, that's the size those books. That's the size I did the pages for these books, both traditionally and then later digitally, because that's like 1.5. Like you scale that down by 2/3, and that's standard comic size. I don't know why it's that size, but it is. So. That's what I work at. If you work at different sizes, then you can use your settings here. You set the full bleed. This is the full size of the canvas, the first one. Resolution. I always work 600 dpi, especially because I do black and white stuff. If you're working in color, you don't need to work that high res, but printing things out at 300 dpi that are straight black and white get a little bit rough edges. The default expression color, default color mode, basically. Gray if you're going to be doing a black and white comic, obviously. Or in some cases, I just hit monochrome because I'm going to use screen tones for my black and white stuff. Because I'm mimicking old school manga. Oh, I got to show you that. It does halftones really well. That includes a default frequency. So in this case, that would be like 75 or lines per inch for me. Paper color, kind of obvious. And then this is your actual, what's the trim size going to be here? This is a little weird because we have to kind of set the bleed size first, and then it recalculates this, and sometimes it'll change the size of your canvas. So sometimes you'll set it, you go back down, you do the bleed, and then you have to reset the size of the canvas. I don't know why it does that. It's math. But then there's also this default border inner size. So that's the that's what that inner box is the default border size. So that's where I put my that's where I put all my borders by default. I'm trying to keep all my lettering within there. So nothing is ever in danger of getting too close to the edge. And these are, again, I'm coming from more of the traditional American comic sensibility, but you can put in whatever settings. So if like you're copying a book, say like a first, second book, and you want to use that size, you can put those values in. Yes?
I'm just curious how you started learning yourself at a EXPO studio.
Okay, well, I was coming from being a long-term Photoshop user, and what my first, the first thing I did was do several comic sample pages, and kind of use that as my test bed. And I just played with it. But this is what I do with any software. I just play with it first. Usually it helps if I have some sort of project that doesn't have a lot of weight attached to it. Some fun project. In this case, I don't know if you were here early in the beginning, but these Mars pages were actually the first thing that I tried doing in Clip Studio, in part because I wanted to use the perspective ruler tools. I specifically wanted to learn that, and I wanted to learn how to use the inking tools. Those were the two things that I had in mind. That's the reason I bought it. And, and I had this like 8-page sample script that I wanted to draw. So that's what I threw a project at it. These days, at the time, I don't think there was much in the way of like YouTube about it, but right now I'm learning Blender, for instance, which is like way more technical, and I'm using YouTube all over the place for that. So, I mean, I would say if there's something that if you're really getting started and you're stuck, how do you do X? Yes? I'd be shocked if there wasn't a YouTuber who had put something up there. If I were a younger person, maybe I would be doing that. But, yes?
So, do you have any like resources on how to just know how to set up a page, like how do panels work and things like that?
Oh, right. Not a specific one. I do have the page settings thing on my handout. So there, or at least is that. The panel thing, again, I'm just drawing them. I'm drawing my panels. Oh, that's something I want to show you. Let's go back to that sample page. So we did the panels in pencil. There's another reason for using vector layers for things like panels. This also holds for backgrounds too. But so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rulers from that original panel layer. So this one's got those rulers. What I can do is while I'm selected the new, so I'm going to ink these borders. I'm just going to select that, it's on it, and then I'm going to do a check mark for the one that has the panel rulers. And so that's going to use the panel rulers that one has. And then I'm going to use this, we'll use this brush again. And I'll just do one panel real quick. This way, and I'll do the bottom here, because it is going up and down. So you're noticing I'm not being real accurate here. I'm totally crossing over, and that's for a reason.
There's also a cool vector eraser.
Yes, the vector eraser tool. That is exactly it. So under the eraser, there's this vector eraser tool which you can use, and if there's any intersecting lines, it will erase everything up to the point that it intersects. So you can use this to quickly like draw your ink panels. This also is awesome for doing things like buildings. So you can you don't have to be super accurate, and so you can draw very quickly and then come and clean it back up very fast. So ruling your panels. I rule my panels. it can go very quickly. So that is another reason to use like a vector layer for games. Question?
I've never done any digital art. I'm just wondering, and this might not be anything, but can you like, if you're working by hand, like take advantage of any of that? Like if you scanned in your work and then made it in copied layers, could you use resize tools and
Yeah,
stuff?
absolutely. So you could
Okay.
import any basic image file in and do manipulation
Right.
in, and if you're, you want to say clean up and like do a building or something, and then if you don't want to ink it digitally, you could even print it back out and print it out on Bristol. I mean, for a good chunk of the pages in this book, I penciled them all in here and then printed it back out in Bristol and inked it by hand. But then eventually I switched to doing totally digital on it just because I was like, this is a really long story and I would like to get it done. And it was around the time I was like, okay, I'm learning to paint. I'll do comics digitally and I'll do paintings traditionally. Digital, traditional, and then I use the digital tools to like plan so, I mean, there's no reason you can't use it as an additional tool to help do things more traditionally as well. It's just one more tool in the toolbox. Yes?
So, at the very beginning, you had like 7-page.
Yeah, oh, right, yes.
And then that layout.
Yeah, I should show you that as a part of you're creating your project. You go over here, you want multiple pages, it's down here. Down here at the bottom, multiple pages, you can turn it on and off, tell it how many you want. So if you want a 10-page comic, so if I'm doing my graphic novels, I bundle each scene together, for instance, as one bundle of pages, for instance. Oh, I need to actually give it a save folder, huh? Whatever, I'll just put it on the desktop. Doesn't matter. So then, when it pulls up, takes a second. There we go. So then here's a new thing, and then you work on each page. Double click on it, it opens up. Oh, weird.
Can you page numbers too?
You can set the page number. It's all there at the bottom here. Now I apparently hit the wrong binding size on this because I mostly work on my main desktop machine, and I didn't have the settings right. Oh yes, look at that, right binding versus left binding. Start page from the right, because it was like assuming I was making manga. Oh, here's the starting page number, so I can start with 1. You can also tell it, what's the name of the story, paradigm shift number 5. You can get a cover page if you want. You can tell it to have the page numbers on or off. They're just there as information for you. They don't necessarily render out in the file for a final. Oh, also game changer for me, that was one of the reasons, was you can open Photoshop documents directly and export Photoshop documents directly. That makes it easy to integrate into any workflow.
Wait, how do you export Photoshop documents directly?
You just save it as a Photoshop document. Save as, here, let me go over here. We'll go over to, yeah, here. Let's use this one. All right, so we will just save a duplicate as a Photoshop document. It's right there.
Thank you.
And all you do is tell it where you want it to go, and it does it. Oh, layer information. So there are some things that obviously won't transfer. Like, for instance, I use halftones. Oh, I need to show you that. The halftone information will not transfer directly, but that's okay. I just use it as a preview when I'm working a clip, and then I render my halftones in Photoshop later anyway. But I can render out those if I have a specific thing. Oh, it won't render out tones if it's in a layer group, but it will render out tones if it's on a specific layer. That's how that particular thing works. I haven't even shown you the tones. I can do it, of course. This is an older computer, so it is taking longer than I would like it to, but it's also a big freaking page. Oh.
Is it better to do individual pages or multiple pages, like just the file name?
Oh, this is just because I have so many layers.
Okay.
The individual, it just it creates a container file, but that just is here are the pages in the file. But I can show you what it looks like on the desktop. So for this, it creates a demo page. Here's the file that is the layer and then each page is its own file. So yeah, so they're just grouped together in their own folder. That's. Oh, cancel that. I don't need this. I want to show you more things.
Can you export it to be like a PDF or something?
Right. Well, so in my workflow is draw it and flip, bring it into Photoshop for final page prep, bring it into InDesign, do all the work that needs to turn it into a book in InDesign, and then I export a press-ready PDF out of InDesign. That's my workflow. But I've been using those programs for decades at this point, so I'm an old dog, and I do learn new tricks, but I also use my old tricks. Okay, so here's I toned this page using the exact same thing I did for the colors that I showed you. But this has got this wonderful little toggle right here in the effect thing called tone. And it will create the classic manga tones. And all you have to do if you want to change the size, you change the frequency. I had to muck around with the size on this because traditionally you'd be printing it at 75 lines per inch, but this is 11 by 17 shrunk down to that size, so I had to do math. And so half of 75 is about 36. So 36 is what would be printed on the page. But that's, and there's also, you can change the type, the shape. Here's those are some ellipse shapes or asterisk shapes, so showing up very easily. Crosses. Actually, I like to just straight up lines sometimes. Lines look kind of cool. So this is a fun effect that you can use for your comics, especially if you're doing mini comics and you're going to be printing them up at Staples or something, and you're doing pure black and white. Screen tones are your friend because they can create interesting black and white gray tones that have character to them. I love just the straight up circles though. That's my go-to. Although I've been playing with the lines a little more as well. Yeah, we've only got time for one or two more questions, but we're yeah.
What is this book that you made called?
My book?
Yeah, the book.
Yeah, it's called Paradigm Shift. And if you're interested, you can pick up a card. Yeah, and hopefully I'll have this issue 1 out for mice next year. But is there any other questions? I know that there's so much here. I just wanted to cover the main techniques that I use to create my comics. There's more nuance, but those are all the tools that I use. I use the pencil, I use the rulers. There are more rulers. There's a lot of cool rulers it's like a cousin, it's like a simple cousin to the perspective ruler, but there's a single point that you can hit and it'll all radiate off from a single point. There's curves that you can draw on. The rulers alone were the reason to use this program for me. And then the inking tools are really powerful. There's a lot of control over the brushes. You can tweak them to your heart's desire once you've figured it out, but but it's all just in that dialogue there, and you just play with it, and you're like, oh yeah, that's how it works. And then using vector layers for inking is incredibly powerful. Good tip, group all of your inks into a single folder, and then you can turn them on and off very easily. You can also, like, I'll put all the characters onto a single layer and all the backgrounds onto another layer, so it makes it easier to select. A lot of those options that I showed you for the fill tool work with the Magic Wand tool as well. A lot of the tools are very similar to Photoshop tools. So you've got your brush, you've got your ink, spray can, fill, gradients, selections. Those all basically work the same as Photoshop. There's like, just like the main difference is like this object selector is what you use to select the perspectives for the rulers. And then the fact that there's a couple different kinds of layers and that each layer can have its own attributes like color mode. Like that makes it very different from Photoshop. The interface obviously is very changeable, so I would just say try to just use those basic tools when you first start using it. You can expand out into all the other crazy features later, but I think this should give you a starting point to like get in. Yes?
Do you use text in Clip Studio, or do you do that in InDesign?
I do my basic text in Clip Studio. I do the final text in InDesign and Photoshop. But I will mock up all my dialogue. Definitely, I mock up all that in Clip Studio, and I just use a basic font. I just don't have as much control. It doesn't do like kerning, and like there's a mode that I really like in Photoshop. It's optical spacing that works really well with the font that I use. But you can, I mock up all my dialogue in its own layer group in Clip Studio, and then I do the final outside Clip Studio. Yeah?
Yeah, I came in a little late, apologies if you already covered this, but you see there's a clip on the website, there's a Clip Studio King Pro and a Clip Studio HEX. Like which version?
Right, whichever the more expensive version is the one I'm using. Yeah. And it has just some more bells and whistles in it. But I got it on sale, so I would recommend doing the same. If you're not so sure, just keep an eye on it. It goes on sale periodically. I got it for $100, and it is more than paid for itself many times over.
If you're doing animation at all, use X, not Pro, because Pro only lets you animate 24 frames at a time.
Ah, that's what it is. It's the animation features, yes. And I have done some animation work in this, and it is pretty nice. Yeah?
Were you able to change the type of layer, like raster to vector or back?
Yeah, they're convertible back and forth. But you usually only convert them if you like made a mistake and you're like, oh crap, I wanted to work in this other mode. And if you export to Photoshop, everything gets turned into raster anyway, because Photoshop has its own vector controls that are completely different. I think there was.
I have a question. Do you only do like print comics, or do you also do like digital comics, and is there like a difference?
Well, so actually, this started out as a webcomic, but I always intended it to be graphic novels. And so I'm currently rerunning it on my website just because these are the result of a Kickstarter I did back in 2019 that fulfilled in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic and whatever. Are you interested in like how the workflow is different, or or is it a publishing question? Workflow? No, it's basically the same. Yeah. I always design for print, and then I can always scale it down for ebooks or for web.
When you're exporting for web, what are your ideal settings?
So basically, I max out at whatever it used to be I sort of like did 600 pixels wide, but the screen size is just so much bigger now. I would do something like 1024 or something like that. It's not exact science anymore because like computers are so much more powerful now and web connections are so much more powerful. But yeah, I try to split the difference. I don't want it to be, I don't post print size stuff up there. For one, I just, not that I'm expect anybody to go and like rip off my work and print it up, but I kind of do want to have crappier versions on the web, just sort of like as a basic fail-safe that, you know, just because somebody wanted to make a t-shirt of my stuff, it would be a crappy version to use for that. But, you know, so I don't post my full-size stuff. But, you know, I think what I'm using here, I can actually just open up the freaking file because I have it in here. Ebooks, Kindle, I think is, where is the images? Oh, where are they? Oh, there. PNGs, just look at the size. Oh yeah, oh, Kindle ones are really small. Those are only like 1280 tall. But, you know, I'd say sort of with maximum 1024 pixels, and then whatever height is. But that's sort of about the right size. Yeah, so it'd be sort of, basically it's like half the size of an iPad screen, basically. Absolute maximum would be with sort of the retina size of a retina display on an iPad would be the maximum I would go. I think that's like 2048 wide. So anyway, that's time. We're actually past time. So thank you everyone for this, and great. And please, if you're interested and have other questions, take a card. You can hit me up on email in the future. I'm kind of on the socials, but email is my best contact.